Christian parents often do not take this responsibility towards their children seriously. And which responsibility am I speaking about? The responsibility to preach the gospel? But this morning I am talking about the responsibility to teach obedience to the gospel. Therefore, many children in Christian homes are still unconverted. Not only that, converted children are not serious about obeying the gospel. So by living such lukewarm lives, both Christian parents and Christian children are not realizing what a great loss they are enduring. And I'm hoping that after listening to this sermon, we will correct ourselves. My first point today is honor your father and mother. Honor your father and mother. Last time, we had looked at Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 1, where Paul commanded Christian children to obey their Christian parents. And he gave them a reason to be obedient to the parents. He said, "For this is right." Why does he say that? For this is right. Why is obedience to parents right? Because these children have now become a new person after believing in the gospel of Jesus Christ. They were earlier lawless people who did not obey the law of God, who did not want to obey the law of God, and did not have the power to obey the law of God. The law of God which teaches them to obey their parents. But now, after believing in the gospel of Jesus Christ, they have a new nature. And one of the characteristics of this new nature is called righteousness. When we believe in Jesus Christ, we become a new person created in righteousness and holiness. Righteousness means that now our nature wants to obey the law of God, and it has the power to obey the law of God. That is why Paul calls the obedience of the Christian children right. Righteous nature produces behavior which is called right. It is right in the eyes of God. Obedience of the Christian children to their Christian parents is right in the eyes of God. But where in the law of God is it written that children must obey their parents? When Paul is talking about righteousness and obedience to the law, he's thinking about the Mosaic law, right? So he wants to tell us where that comes from. Where does this obedience to parents comes from? That's why in our passage, that is Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 2 and 3, he quotes from the Old Testament and he quotes from Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 16. So let me first read our passage, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 2 and 3, and then we will read Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 16, and you can see the similarities there. Ephesians chapter 6, 2 and 3 says, "Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land." Now let's turn to Deuteronomy and chapter 5 and verse 16. It says, "Honor your father and your mother, as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be long, and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. So this commandment is actually taken from the 10 commandments, which was first recorded in Exodus chapter 20. And that's why here Moses says, honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you. That means he's pointing to what has happened earlier at Mount Sinai, where God gives the 10 commandments to the nation of Israel. And coming back to our verse in Ephesians chapter 6 and the beginning of verse 2, Paul makes it very clear that God commands children to honor their father and mother. So he is drawing from the law of Moses, and now he is applying it not to only to Jews, but he is applying it to Christians all over the world. And Christian children to whom he says, honor your father and mother. Now there are a lot of ways you can honor a person. For example, let's read Acts chapter 28 and verse 10. Acts chapter 28 and verse 10. It's written, they also honored us greatly, and when we were about to sail, they put on board whatever we needed. Actually, the literal translation says, they honored us with many honors, or they honored us with many marks of respect, is what is written. Which means that when Paul and his companions were there on the island of Malta, the people there honored them by giving them something. They gave them marks of respect, they gave them gifts, and that's how they honored Paul and those who were traveling with him. Similarly, when children are called to honor their parents, children can definitely honor their parents by giving them some good gifts. As our children do when on our birthday. They make something or buy something which is not very expensive and they gift it to us. That's how they honor us. You can also show honor by giving thanks to a person. For example, in the book of Psalms, chapter 50, verse 23, God says, he who offers a sacrifice of thanksgiving honors me. We honor God when we express our thanks to Him. Every time we sing a song of thanksgiving here, we are honoring God. Similarly, you can honor your parents by thanking them for all that they have done for you. As our children do on our birthdays, they write small thank you cards to honor us on our birthday. But all your gifts and all your good words of thanks would be of no value if you do not obey your parents. Because according to the Bible, obedience is at the very center of honor. Obedience is the essence of honor. We obey those whom we honor. Now let me come to you with a few passages where honor is connected with obedience. So let's turn to the book of Numbers and chapter 22. Numbers chapter 22. And verse 15. Numbers chapter 22 and verse 15. So it's written there, once again, Balak sent princes more in number and more honorable than these. Now, Balak, the king of Moab, was trying to convince Prophet Balaam to come and curse the people of Israel. So he sent some leaders to convince Balaam. But Balaam refused to go with them because God said, you are not going to curse them because they are my people. Therefore, the king of Moab, Balak, sends more leaders who are more honorable, or I should say, more distinguished to convince Balaam. Why? Why? In the hope that Balaam will obey the words of these honored men. Why do you send honored men to somewhere? To make an invitation. So honored men are obeyed. Their words are taken with seriousness. And that's why Balak sends honored princes to Balaam to convince him, so that Balaam would listen to them. So basically what we are learning here is that we obey those whom we honor. Another example would be 2 Samuel chapter 23 and verse 19 and 23. 2 Samuel chapter 23 and verse 19 and 23. He was the most renowned of the 30. So here we are talking about a man called Abishai. It's written he was the most renowned of the 30 and became their commander. Now that word renowned there is actually honorable. He was the most honorable among the 30 and became their commander. But he did not attain to the 3. Now let's read verse 23. Now this time we are talking about another man in David's army, Benaiah. It's written he was renowned or honored among the 30, but he did not attain to the 3, and David set him over his bodyguard. Now these verses are talking about two men, Abishai and Benaiah. Both of them were part of David's army, and other men in David's army honored these two guys. So the rest of the army honored Abishai and Benaiah. So what does David do? David makes them leaders over the army. Why? Because he knew that these honored men will be obeyed. He made them commanders so that they would command and the army would obey them. So honored men are obeyed. So there is a good leadership principle there. Make only those people leaders whom the people honor. Because if they honor them, they will obey them. If you make people leaders who are not honored among the people, when they say something, the people are not going to obey. So you make leaders who are honored among the people. Coming to another example that we find in the Gospel of Mark. Mark chapter 7 and verse 5 to 9. Mark chapter 7 and verse 5 to 9. It's written, and the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, so asked Jesus, why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands? And he said to them, well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. You leave the commandment of God and hold to the tradition of men. And he said to them, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your tradition. Jesus quotes from Isaiah to talk about the Pharisees. Jesus says that the Pharisees honor God with their lips, but they do not honor God from the heart. So the honor is only words, but the honor is not there in obedience. Although they give lip service to God, they do not obey God. Why? Because they honor their own elders more than God. So when it comes to obedience, they obey the oral traditions which their elders have taught them. In fact, they replace the law of God with the tradition of their elders. If you truly honor God, then you must obey the law of God. So the conclusion here is that obedience is at the center of honoring. Christian children honor their Christian parents only if they obey them. Gifts and good words are simply not enough. Every Mother's Day, we see on the social media that people are praising their mothers for what they have done for them. Sometimes I wonder if these people honor their mothers the same way on all the other days. I have found that for most children, their mothers are easy targets. Why? Because they think she's weak and therefore they do not need to obey her. Children may give expensive gifts to their mothers. Children may profusely thank their mothers on social media. But if they do not obey her, they are not honoring her. Parents must not get carried away by gifts and flowery words. If your children do not obey you, they do not honor you. They honor those whom they obey. They obey their peers. They obey social media influencers. They obey youth icons. They are the people they honor. Paul is saying that Christian children should behave differently. They will not only honor their parents with gifts and words, but more importantly, with their obedience. That is the mark of a true Christian child. My second point, command with a promise. Command with a promise. In the first part of verse 2, Paul quotes the command, honor your father and mother. And then he interrupts it in between and makes his own comment. In the second part of verse 2, he says, which is the first commandment with a promise. Why does Paul make that comment? See, when God made a covenant with the nation of Israel, He first gave them the 10 commandments. And in the 10 commandments, the first command that comes with the promise of God is this fifth commandment, which is honor your father and your mother. But what is that promise? What is the promise attached to this command? Paul mentions that in verse 3. So then he continues. After making his comment in the second part of verse 2, he continues in verse 3 with the promise attached to the commandment to honor your father and mother. He says, so if you obey your father and mother, this is what will happen. So that it may be well with you, and that you may be long lived on the earth. According to this promise, things will go well for those who honor their father and mother. Going well means God will do good to them throughout their lives. He will treat them well. He will prosper them. That's the meaning of going well with you, because God is with you. According to this promise, they will also enjoy a long life. This is closely connected with the first part of the promise, which says that things will go well with you. Because if God is going to do good to you, if God is going to treat you well, if God is going to prosper you, it is natural that you will enjoy a long life here on earth. But the interesting thing is that this promise is not attached only with this command, honor your father and mother. Actually, this promise is attached to the whole law of God. See what Moses told the whole nation of Israel in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 40. He repeats this promise to the whole nation of Israel. Deuteronomy and chapter 4 and verse 40. Therefore you shall keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for all time. So Moses says, if you keep the law of God, things will go well with you and you will have a long life. Moses repeats it again then in chapter 6 and verse 2 and 3. Let's read that. Once again, he's talking to the nation of Israel. He says, chapter 6 verse 2 and 3 of Deuteronomy, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. That's the promise there. And then verse 3 says, hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you. That's the promise again there. So you will live long, things will go well with you. And says that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. This promise is actually attached even to the sundry, smallest of laws in the law of God. Read Deuteronomy chapter 22. Deuteronomy chapter 22 and verse 6 and 7. Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 6 and 7. If you come across a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with young ones or eggs, and the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall let the mother go, but the young you may take for yourself, that it may go well with you and that you may live long. So when any Jew lived a life obedient to the law given to them through Moses, his life was prolonged and things went well with them. Why? Because God blessed their obedience. When they obeyed the commandments of God given to them through the prophet Moses, they were blessed by God. In the same way, when any Christian lives a life obedient to the law given by Jesus Christ, then his life will be prolonged and things will go well with him. Because Christ blesses their obedience. Now, of course, you might be thinking, oh, do all obedient Christians live a long life and everything goes well with them? Of course, God makes some exceptions to this promise according to his sovereign will. For example, King Solomon says in Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and verse 15, he says, there is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his wickedness. A wicked man who prolongs his life in his wickedness. In fact, the greatest exception to this promise was Jesus Christ. Despite his perfect obedience to the law of God, his life here on earth ended prematurely. So God, in his sovereign will, makes exceptions to this promise. That is why this promise is given with some level of uncertainty. Look at Paul's language that he uses. He says, so that it may be well with you. He does not say, it will go well with you. He says, so it may go well with you. And that you may be long lived on the earth. So he speaks that with a certain level of uncertainty. So now if this promise is attached to the whole law, and anybody who is in covenant with God can actually gain this promise, why is this promise specifically attached to the commandment given to children? Is the question. This promise generally comes true for obedient Christian children. Because from a very young age, when you begin to obey Jesus Christ, you are blessed by him. From a young age, he begins to do good to you. From a young age, he treats you well. From a young age, he prospers you. In this world, Christian children are more blessed than people who become Christians later in their adulthood. Because they have been receiving the blessings of Jesus from a very young age. And so when you are being blessed by Jesus from a very young age, it affects your body and soul. And things go well with you. And you enjoy a long life compared to many other Christians. That is why this promise is especially given to children. But how do children come to the knowledge of the law of Jesus Christ? Through their parents. That is how God ordained it even for the nation of Israel. He gave parents the responsibility to teach their children about the law. I want you to read Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. And verse 6 and 7. Deuteronomy 6 verse 6 and 7. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. So parents are supposed to teach the law of God to their children through the day. And that's how a Christian home also is supposed to function. Jesus pours out the knowledge of His law through the parents. Christian parents teach their children the law of Christ. And when these children obey their parents, Jesus blesses them. That is why the promise is attached with the commandment to honor your father and mother. If you honor them, if you obey them, then Jesus will bless you. So, Christian parents have been given a great responsibility. Only if they teach the law of Christ to their children, this promise will come true in the lives of their children. If Christian parents do not teach their children, then with each passing day, your children are losing out on the opportunity to be blessed by Jesus Christ. Your children will lose this promise if you don't teach them from the Bible. Many parents do not take teaching of the Bible seriously. I want to ask those parents this morning, do you not want things to go well with your children? Do you not want them to have a long life? Why are you depriving them of Christ's blessings? Parents, you have a great responsibility of how your children's future will turn out. If you teach them today, they'll be blessed through their life. That is why today many scientists, doctors, counselors trace back the physical and spiritual problems in this new generation back to their childhood. If the childhood was good, the rest of their life is blessed. If there are problems in parenting, there are problems in their childhood, the rest of the future gets affected. Christian children who are taught by their Christian parents will generally do better than other children in their adulthood. That's a promise of God. But it is not only the parents' responsibility. The children must honor their parents by obeying them. Children must understand that when they do not obey their parents' teaching, they are missing out on the blessings of Jesus Christ. I want to ask the children, do you want things to go well with you in your life? Do you want to live a long life here on earth? Start obeying your parents today, right now. And since this promise is attached to the whole law, I want to encourage adults also who did not have a Christian upbringing, who did not have Christian parents to teach them. See, in God's timing, He has brought you to faith. So there is nothing wrong with the timing of you coming to faith. You can also receive this promise if you are serious about obeying the law as taught by your spiritual parents. Your church leaders, your spiritual mentors, as they teach you from the law of God and say, do this, then obey it. And this promise belongs to you also. Do not be just hearers of God's word, but be doers of God's word. A lot of people listen to these sermons, walk out, they forget about it. They don't do it in their lives. This promise is not for them. This promise is for those who listen to the sermons being preached, meditate upon it through the week, and apply it in their lives, this promise belongs to them. God says, it will go well with you and He will prolong your life.